Welcome to the panel. It's called AI, Autonomous Vehicles and Energy, Powering Transportation in Smart Cities. And we have Drago, Anguelov, and I'll do a full intro in a second, from Waymo. We have Kristin, Bray from the city of Austin, and we have our own Chandra Bhat from the Cockrell School of Engineering. I'm going to read their bios. They will talk about their work in a second. Kristin Bray is a business process consultant with the Transportation and Public Works Department in the city of Austin. She supports the Autonomous Vehicle Safety Working Group, and which is an interdepartmental group focused on safe autonomous vehicle deployments. So welcome to the panel. Drago Anguelov is, first of all, a very close friend of mine, but also VP and head of research for Waymo. He's an expert in 3D vision, 3D computer vision, with several inventions in neural networks, and he won ImageNet in 2014. You might recall, ImageNet is the start of deep learning back in 10 years ago, a little bit more. So welcome to the panel as well. And finally, Chandra Bhat is Chair Professor of Civil Architectural and Environmental Engineering here at UT. He's an expert in transportation science. He's globally recognized in travel behavior modeling, urban planning, and advanced econometric analysis. And he's also a longtime member of Good Systems. Welcome to the panel. We will be touching on areas today with this panel, this STEAM panel, regarding autonomous vehicles, ethics, smart cities. Maybe we'll touch a little bit on energy as well. But let me start with the first question for all of you. I would like you to tell me about your work, so we get to know you. As it relates, for instance, Kristin, you work on smart and fair communities. As it relates to Waymo's recent advancements regarding autonomous vehicles, Drago, and as it regards to studies on transportation behavior in the smart cities, Chandra, and please emphasize what excites you about your areas of work. So let's start with Kristin. Please go ahead.
Hi. Hello. Yes. Hi, Kristin Bray. So I've been working with a smart mobility team within Transportation and Public Works for the last year. And I'm one of the facilitators for our Autonomous Vehicle Safety Working Group, which, as you mentioned, is an interdepartmental group with our public safety departments, Transportation and Public Works, and Aviation department. And we focus on communicating with AV companies, sharing strategies both internally and with other peer cities that also have autonomous vehicles, and collecting data related to autonomous vehicle operating in Austin, as well as helping to facilitate the training for public safety personnel so that the first time that they encounter an AV is not during the midst of an emergency. What excites me about this work is, first, it's cool. I mean, robo cars and taxis, and it's a brand new world, and it's really exciting. There's a lot of really great people that work on trying to make it safe, and seeing it from multiple perspectives is really interesting to me. And I get to learn about all of these while not actually having to have a Ph.D. in robotics, so I like that. Second, it's also interesting just to see how the public interacts with autonomous vehicles. We, being a city department, get a much different perspective than you might see, online. We receive a lot of communication from the public, and we really try to take that into account and then communicate that with AV companies to try to resolve whatever concerns there might be. So those are things that excite me about my work.
Well, thank you, Kristin. Drago, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Drago Anguelov. I lead now it's AI Foundations team at Waymo. And this is a team focused on leveraging the latest development in machine learning and artificial intelligence in order to improve and evolve our systems at Waymo to make our models more performant, safer, more efficient, and so on. This is probably one of the most interdisciplinary panels I've been on. I'm usually go on panels at the AI conference and talk to modeling people. I'm not a policy person per se. I'm a first at heart a technologist. That said, I've been working in various technology areas and launched products for the last almost 20 years. And I've been in autonomous vehicles now 10 years. So I'm very excited. And what got me into autonomous vehicles was the potential to build what I imagined at the time would be a really compelling experience and capability for humans to really leverage. And initially, it used to be this dream, wouldn't it? What would be possible when we built this vehicle? And by the way, it took a while to build them and validate them and pass a threshold, very confident to put them into the world. But you don't really truly know. And then when you launch it and you get to sit in it, in my case, ride the streets of San Francisco and play the music and just see the steering wheel turn, then you see that, at least to me, and maybe I'm biased, but I think there are many people also trying them. It's, as a product, it ended up maybe more compelling than we even potentially expected, so that's very exciting.
Chandra?
Yeah, I agree with Drago, the interdisciplinarity. So what excites me from a research standpoint, I always like to think about systems, in particular transportation systems, as having three legs. One is infrastructure, the other is technology, and in some broad ways, I see Kristin representing the policy and infrastructure side. I see Drago, representing the technology side. But the thing that really excites me is the human behavior element of the entire system. Because at the end of the day, it's humans. We are talking about quality of life of humans, the ability to travel to places, to access activities, and that's where human behavior and infrastructure and technology systems come together in the context of transportation. Many benefits, and we can talk about many benefits of AVs, but let me give you a simple example of behavior. AVs have been touted, and perhaps rightly so, to some extent at least, to be able to provide better mobility for those who are mobility challenged, like those who are older people, right? But guess what? It's the older people who are least likely to adopt AVs. And there are many reasons for it. One of those reasons being, you can say, yeah, they are not that tech savvy. Yeah, that argument has been made, that has been established. But it's also our human behavior. That is, as we age, our way of feeling young is to continue to do what we have done all along in our life. In the particular case of driving, I want the steering wheel. It gives me that sense of control when my physical and mental capabilities are failing.
Stick shift, right?
Yeah. So
Europe, right? It's more fun to drive.
that's where behavior starts to come in. We need to consider behavior. That excites me. On the teaching side, of course, as professors, we are here. One of our exciting jobs is ensuring that we have a pipeline of the next generation of leaders. And I'm excited by what AI can do and what AI potentially can lead to challenges. I think Jennifer was alluding to a collaborative that Stacy was also at. And one of the panelists over there made a comment that really struck with me, which was, as we teach and as we use AI, what is going to be the most important for the next generation of leaders is to let them know what AI cannot do, or let them know what AI cannot do very well. I think that's what was, and that certainly excites me, the whole idea of teaching. And the last one, and I'll stop there, is community engagement. I think, Robin, you referred to this in many different ways, the social context. Min and some of our wonderful students, Angela, Hanjun, Anna, and Whitney, who are all here, it's interesting how we can be in our own bubbles when we create technology. But I think you were also talking about this, Kristin, public. What are they thinking? I do know that when we had this wonderful National Science Foundation grant about urban air mobility, we went out and we wanted to get a sense of, will you adopt? What are some of the issues? We went to communities, right? And we went to, at that point in time, relatively minority communities just to see what their take was. And it was very interesting. It was very instructive for us. The first response was, don't come to us about all these UAVs and stuff like that. Those are, some years in the future. Let's talk about what my problems are today, right? So I think that community engagement, that need for eliciting what is the public thinking, what is the community thinking, how can we work with them, I think we just need to do a much better job on that, and that excites me.
Yeah, that's a whole, that was not my question now, but it's a whole new conversation, because I think we have pitched the cell phone, the modern cell phone in 1992, 1990s to these communities, and telling them they will be doing banking and running their businesses. Communities may be more limited social, maybe economically speaking, right? They would have said, like, no way, right? So, a lot of these technologies, the Waymo technologies and AI and fancy AI and robotics, it looks like we need to make an argument that we need to try to foresee how it's going to help down to all of the strata of our society. Anyway, that's off track. Henry Ford,
Maybe a comment. I respond something, two things. Maybe I'm an unusual aging person where I kind of, to me, being young is keep trying new things in some proportion as opposed to not trying them, but I'm not sure that's common. One thing that maybe we've observed, and that a lot of people are skeptical about the technology, but there is a dramatic phase shift from trying it. So if you get over the bar of trying it, opinions can shift very quickly. This is something, maybe even a single ride. But also there's a question which population and what segments are willing to even go ahead and try it, or what will push them to try it. We did actually some studies with elderly people. So there was a pilot in one of the cities that we serve pre-Austin. And we worked with a population of folks above 65 years old. And we provided them Waymo service. And what we found is after they try it and experienced it a few times, they're actually a lot more likely to use and go out. So they were 60% more likely to go outside and use transportation than if this Waymo was not provided. So there is a way to, adoption, maybe it goes through trying the product, but there's this question of who is willing to do it and what does it take. And I think it varies for the different people.
That's a very good point, yeah. Providing experiential opportunities, we have also found in our research, can really take the person into a different mode of thinking. In the large scheme of things, though, we need to understand these kinds of issues, right? So why is it that people who are older tend to be initially negative? We need to understand, and that's where issues of attitudes start coming in, and that's what we study. But in the large scheme of things, I think what we have also noticed is that older people, one of the issues is when they don't have control over other things in life, they want to have perfect control. So for example, a quick example is, you're going in your vehicle, And you have either these digital knobs that you can press on your steering wheel to increase the volume, or you have your wonderful knob that listens to you. Absolutely. You turn it clockwise, it goes up. Turn it counterclockwise. These digital things, among older people, there is a sense of, I don't know if it's going to listen to me at exactly the moment I want it to listen to me. So these are the kinds of things we study, and I think we need to bring some of these issues. Lots of benefits, I'm not denying that, of AVs, but I think we also need to understand some of the unintended consequences, which is what my students and I study.
It occurs to me so many questions on agency and so on, but let's stick to the city, the technology, the transportation, smart city issues. Henry Ford transformed the US from a train-based nation to a car-driven economy, transportation economy. In the meantime, Europe has gone other ways. China and Japan, the same as Europe, and have made trains indispensable, effective, lovable, at least for me, as a public service. So Kristin and Chandra, conceptually, could personal autonomous cars, and maybe extending it to autonomous share rides, like buses that are autonomous or whatever, could there be because they are autonomous, could there be a substitute for the need of trains in this country? In the sense that trains give you back your user time during the rides, or regional hauls. They increase your comfort, affordability, and flexibility. So, Kristin?
Oh, I think if you never build infrastructure for trains, then obviously something will come and fill the gap. And will it do it as well as a train? In my opinion, maybe not. Even if you're in an autonomous vehicle, you're maybe by yourself, or maybe it's a shuttle, you're still in traffic. And that's still something that's going to occur. Congestion is a huge problem, and with the construction on I-35, and if we continue with construction for the proposed rail line, that is a lot of people on the same shared roads still going nowhere. So in my opinion, I think that you should still invest in that sort of infrastructure to bypass that. I think it's a lot easier to get some places via train than it would be via car. I live in Texas, so I obviously have a car because I have to. And the bus line from personally where I live is just not a feasible thing for me, because you do lose that time in transferring and commuting that way. And working in transportation and public works, I see firsthand a lot of people who are very committed to other travel options, who bike regularly, who walk, who find different ways of getting around that don't require car ownership. And that sounds great. My version of that would be having real rail infrastructure here that was more accessible to different areas. I think AVs are certainly something that can help with first and last mile. Instead of park and ride, maybe take an AV shuttle somewhere. And I would certainly personally like that. And in terms of the department, we want to ensure that AVs are fitting into our transportation network. We have grand plans. We want to be able to provide multiple options for people of Austin and our tourists and visitors. So in my opinion, it could possibly overtake some of that. With AVs, you tend to have less people riding the bus, for instance. But we want to just ensure that it fits into the network rather than takes over the network.
So maybe I could reinforce that. I believe that it's good to have a mixture of different options, and I think it's a lot of it maps to what flows of people and how large are those sizes of flows of people in the different areas. So in that regard, the cities today are built, a big part of them, with the assumption of car ownership. And that creates, if anything, larger suburban sprawl. And that makes it harder to have sustainable, large-scale transit. And so vehicles like autonomous driving can provide options for people that don't drive, that fit today's setup of cities and otherwise connect to in the more central parts to public transit. There's an option for this. Another thing is that, say, buses and trains potentially, they're still not designed to fit the need of every person. There's a set of constraints. When there's a vehicle dedicated to you, can be relaxed. And so there's certain classes of society, of people that have needs where a vehicle just dedicated to you, waiting to wait for you, giving you extra signals, which a public transport cannot provide, can be quite liberating to people. And so I think there is a number of areas where AVs can fit into an existing framework and complement the things available, as opposed to necessarily just be the one-all be-all of transportation.
All right, so Chandra, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, it depends upon whether you're looking at it from an individual perspective or a systems perspective. From an energy standpoint, public transportation does release much less of carbon dioxide equivalents than a personal vehicle for obvious reasons. The other point is, if we have autonomous vehicles with the paradigm that most individuals are going to be owning those autonomous vehicles, and we do notice a lot of affective emotion, especially among people in the United States. We want our cars. And with that kind of a paradigm, we have found, based on our research, that our overall travel will increase, that the trips will increase, the trip lengths will increase, we might relocate farther away from our workplaces. So it does, once again, have emissions and energy implications. And I think it goes to also what both my very esteemed colleagues mentioned on this panel. It's not a this or that. One of the reasons why public transportation and trains work very well in Europe is that they're all very dense cities, right? Very dense. And when you have dense cities, it is made for public transportation because at each stop, you can get a huge catchment of riders. Now, when you have sprawled settings, you'll have to have many stops to get a decent catchment of riders. But when you have many stops, service degrades. So this is an opportunity where, as Drago was saying, and am I pronouncing your name right?
Either way. Drago, Dragomir is the right name.
Drago?
Dragomir.
Dragomir.
But you can say Drago. It's probably the closest.
As Drago was saying, that's an opportunity to have the first mile, last mile service done by perhaps autonomous vehicles. But I do feel that from a systems perspective, from an emissions perspective, from an energy perspective, we still need to invest in public transportation.
Just maybe a response on the energy side. So at least for robotaxis and Waymo specific case, they're all electric vehicles, 100%. And there is work to source the energy as sustainable as possible as well. So it may be that there is more emissions because more miles are driven, but at least these are also electric automobiles and potentially later other form factors that mitigate this somewhat. At least it's a step forward compared to the usual pool of cars.
On the other side, since you mentioned this, when people know that they're going to be spending a whole lot of time in their vehicles, they don't want to be in the cocoon of the cars that we have now. They want to have much palatial vehicles, much more room. Think about recreational vehicles. And given that the affective emotion is we want to own our own vehicles, imagine if we all started having recreational vehicles. That creates its own problems. That has issues related to capacity. Again, I think what Drago was saying is if the paradigm can be shifted toward subcontracting out travel, that is, you're having Waymo or you're having these ride-hailing type facilities essentially doing much of the travel as opposed to owning our own vehicles, that is a huge paradigm difference.
Well, yeah, but the question here perhaps is, one is what the consumers want. Another thing is that what is the right thing to do, right? Which is exactly what good systems is about and all this conversation, right? So if you're driving, a completely free economy, then we might be the case that, taxes are going down, especially in this administration, right? So there's going to be less and less money for trains, right? So people are going to go for options like owning, well, Waymos are not right now personal cars, but then other companies, maybe Waymo at a certain point sells personal cars, right? So, that goes back into regulation, right? It's like, do we stop at a certain point, companies saying like, well, don't sell so many cars, right? Because that's bad for the environment, right? I guess it's a question, it's not really a question, it's just a thought. So we can maybe move to the next question. Thank you for these comments. So let's go with Drago. I am impressed by Waymo cars, and I do own a Tesla with FSD, and Waymos are way more reliable. So
I don't own Tesla, so I can't comment too much on that.
So can you dive a little bit for the non-experts in what core AI is going inside? Is it just a big fat neural network? Is it some sort of formal reasoning system? There's ontologies. There is just segmentation without ontology, and what data goes in, what sensor technology, how many sensors do we need? Anything you want to comment on that ultimately provides this growing and seamless Waymo experience? Go ahead.
So Waymo was started 15 years ago, and I think through this time, there have been many generations of refining and improving the stack. And through these generations, both the hardware and the software has changed quite dramatically over time. Now, when you think about the use of machine learning and AI in these vehicles, there's this question, why is it there and what does it do? Ultimately, one intuition I can give you is, as we drive through the environment, we see how everyone behaves. And it's really helpful to have models of how others behave, both as entities that interact with you, but even also as an example of how people drive. And so AI is very helpful into taking the external context, building representations. Now, some are human designed that you explicitly train AI to give, that are interpretable and people can more easily understand and work with, or it can build kind of features that are helpful to the AI model that are less interpretable but quite expressive. They help you understand how can the environment potentially behave in the future, what are properties that relate to driving. This AI can derive and help derive from data. It's hard for humans to write all of this by hand. Imagine, what is the function of driving? What is the function of a human moving? What happens when at the traffic light someone's signaling and another? How do you make sense of all of these things? AI is a great help by leveraging all the data we already observe and helping us streamline these observations or representations. So we use it. Now, which tasks? I would say one thing you can do is we actually share with the community a data set. When I joined Waymo, we started working on one. We released it in 2019, and we continuously try to improve it. By the way, for computer science people, we just launched our 6th annual challenges. They are tasks that we want the research community to tackle and potentially see if they can, well, be top on our leaderboards for tasks we think are important. Those tasks, if you go to Waymo Open Dataset and challenges, you'll see the kind of things we are trying to do with AI, or do better with AI in this case, that is relevant. But there is 2 parts you can do. One is this, the famous end-to-end models. Hey, sensors to controls, right? But there is a separate question. Do you want a world model in a more explicit way to have more introspection into what vehicle is doing and how it understands the world? So you can have sensors to controls, but you can also ask the AI and the models to describe to the environment And then based on this environment description and what you plan to do, it allows experts to provide additional safeguards and analysis and even data mining on top, so you understand a lot better what the vehicle is doing. I think in modern robotics, when you put it out in the people, one of the things you should be very mindful of, and this is something, what it should not do. It's very important to understand and model that, right? It's okay, one thing is what it could do is good, but you know, for the vehicle to comply with all of us, you really need to be mindful what it should not do and build all the safeguards that you can to make sure that if AI itself potentially does not have much data support or representation power, that you complement with experts. And so our stack builds this careful combination of these two approaches, ensuring extra safety. And a bit of this safety commitment is seen in other things. For example, we use 3 different types of sensors. And some of these sensors are active sensors. They, for example, LiDAR shoots a ray of light and it returns back if there's something there. Even if a camera pixel does not necessarily recognize it, this active sensor or radar does similar things for big metal things at night. Maybe you don't see it, but radar will see it's a big metal thing in front of you. A map also helps you. Map tells you if something is occluded, you roughly know what will come after. There are all these additional things you can do that bring extra safety that we've traditionally built into the vehicles, right? And I think they underpin some of our, so far, I would say, strong safety record because we built with those in mind. And the last thing is you need to design your stack, especially for a fully autonomous vehicle. How you design the stack and how you plan to test it, you need to think of the two together. So you need to build such a stack that then you can convince yourself you can test. And it's not completely isolated, necessarily black box. You need to think how to interact and build this into the tasks you do.
Well, wonderful. I mean, maybe a related question is, you know, we remember a few years ago, the German cars were dominant at the time, right? They had, you know, millions of lines of code, right? So what, and we know that LLMs have, you know, starting to get close to 1 trillion parameters, right? How big are those models that are driving your cars?
So I can't directly comment, but I will say a few things. On the car, there's a few additional requirements compared to what people train in the data center, right? Like the biggest models, like say, I don't know, let's say ChatGPT v4 or something. That thing was trained, maybe it has trillions of parameters, trained for months and months on a whole data center. That's not necessarily practical to put in the car. That's one thing. Second, it's not exactly I mean, now we don't necessarily just take a model like this. We have research on taking vision language models, or multimodal large language models, and trying to drive with them. They're certainly powerful, but there are certain shortcomings as well. But more importantly, on the vehicle, you have 2 main constraints. One is latency, actually. So you cannot wait for this model to spit the next token in a few seconds. You need to process a very rich set of sensors and react in a split second. Otherwise, you know, there's occasionally situations where you're surprised and you still want a reaction. So you don't have the luxury of just putting some big models and hoping it eventually understands. And second, of course, you have some hardware limitation. You are not going to put a data center on the car. There's price constraints and energy constraints. I mean, you want an electric car. If you put something particularly electric hungry, you're not going to have energy to drive the people. So all these constraints you design to. So they're not trillions of parameters running for a long time by sheer deduction.
All right, I will not put my gaming PC in the car to emulate what you do. Something smaller, something smaller. So, okay, so for Kristin, and I wanted to relate it to this question, right? So we talk about the technology of the car. Let's talk about technology on the city. I would love to hear, and in particular, you know, you've deployed Waymos and cruise cars, who are already the 2nd generation of autonomous cars. What city-wide technologies are being implemented to facilitate the daily integration of AVs?
Aside from Waymo, there are 4 other AV companies who are here. We have Volkswagen, Zoox, Tesla, and AV Ride. And they have all maintained that they really don't need a change in infrastructure to test and deploy their vehicles, really. So it's an interesting concept to compare to, say, like Japan, who's heavily interested in, innovative technologies and very specific like signage or whatnot for autonomous vehicles as they're beginning to test there, versus here and other peer cities where they say that they don't need anything. So there are, of course, recommendations that are less technologically advanced, but still important from the MUTCD federally, where they recommend, making stripes wider for autonomous vehicles, where they recommend checking the contrast on markings on the road, or ensuring that if it's a light pavement, that there's that contrast, or that it's
And those are being implemented already?
So there are, what we do, like part of our group, is to try to find these spots where AVs are having trouble and determine why they might be having trouble. Because if it's something that we can fix pretty easily, if there's an infrastructure enhancements that we can do, whether it is trimming a tree that's occluding a sign, if it is something going on with our signal timing that might confuse an autonomous vehicle, or if it is a faded marking, we want to do that. So right now it's going on a case-by-case basis, but there is obviously an enhancement queue that we have for all of the different things that we'd like to do. But in terms of like specific technology for autonomous vehicles, we maintain that they need to conform to what is available. Where it's not possible to provide this kind of infrastructure, especially when we're still building sidewalks in a lot of East Austin. So to cater to robo-taxis while we're still trying to build some basic infrastructure seems a little lopsided. So it is a balancing act, and we do want to ensure that we are doing our best to meet the needs of all drivers, not just catering to one.
So you think the city, first of all, who's going to pay for it, right? Is if we are suddenly having, many Waymos and Teslas, FSDs, and road taxis and stuff like that, right? Should the taxpayer pay for improving the technology in the city? Should the companies pay for it?
Well, to have a private company pay for an entire city's, road upgrades seems a little unethical. Maybe you might be a better judge of that. But, in terms of
let you be the judge.
Accepting monetary compensation from companies
Chandra.
in order to do these things is not necessarily something that the city does. However, we do, of course, have bonds that we have up for election every few years, especially related to mobility and infrastructure. We also have grant opportunities, and there are, of course, the transportation user fee, which is what our department is mostly funded by, that you'll see on your electric bill. So, it is a combination of taxes and bonds and hopefully grants. If there is a way of being able to get money in a way that doesn't necessarily make an entire area of Austin suddenly belong to an AV company, that would be cool. It's definitely something that we need to maintain our impartiality. We need to be sure that we are applying things that are not necessarily just specific to that. But again, if there is something that we can do to help AVs perceive the world around them, and also if it's an area where human drivers are struggling, then we want to fix it. If anybody lives in the airport area, you might go onto our website and see our dashboard. It has a map kind of all of the incidents that we documented, reported directly to us. And you'll see that there are definitely some times when, with the school zones and the rail line and the sudden change in direction of the street, it's not something that people who don't live there can navigate super easily, and it's something that has confused different AVs from the different companies. So how do we make that better? That is something that's being looked at, obviously, but we want to implement these changes according to our strategic mobility plan, according to programs like Vision Zero, trying to reduce traffic-related fatalities. That is more of how we want to operate, not necessarily having a bunch of really fun gadgets.
So maybe, Chandra, I would like you to pitch on this conversation. This is a transformative moment, it looks like, right? Like we might be, be much more effective on cities. I think I grew up in Barcelona in Spain, and the number of pedestrian runovers are tremendous, right? And part is because if you've been to Barcelona, the blocks are hexagonal, so you don't have visibility, and suddenly we have an opportunity of saving lives in the city, not only in the freeway and so on and so forth, right? So it looks like we should be embracing this at the extreme levels and prepare for facilitate that deployment, or maybe I'm too radical. What are the risks of AV-enabled smart cities? What is a hard line?
Yeah, I think safety is, going to be ultimately the clincher for the move toward mass adoption at some point in time, but that could take another 10, 15 years. We had aggressive predictions from many car manufacturers, including Tesla, that by now all the streets would be full of AVs, that we would not have human drivers. We have human drivers, and what we have found based on our surveys is this is going to continue for quite some time. So as Kristin was saying, we do have to design for that mix of AVs and humans for a decade or even more than that. I think that's really the issue. Now, you talked about pedestrian issues in Barcelona. Now, pedestrian issues are huge in the United States. Within the past 3 years or so, the last year was better, but our pedestrian crashes and fatalities have exploded unbelievably. Really? To the point where it's gone back to what we had in 2000. It was declining all along, but pedestrian fatalities have increased, except for this past year where we had a little bit of. So now the question then becomes, hey, will AVs help decrease the number of pedestrian things? I would put a plug. Please be here for my student Angela Haddad, who will be talking much more about pedestrian-related issues in the context of the new landscape, and that's going to be sometime tomorrow. One of the worries is, and this again comes back to human behavior, Sherry, if she's here, would call it algorithmic discrimination. The issue is when you look at the pedestrian fatalities and pedestrian crashes, minorities are overrepresented in that pool of pedestrian crashes and pedestrian fatalities. Now, you could argue that, hey, that's not surprising. It's an issue of exposure. Minorities own fewer cars. They take public transportation more. They walk more. So all of these things do contribute. But in some of the work we have done, we have control for all of that. And for a variety of reasons, it does seem like motorists as a whole do tend to yield to white pedestrians in the crosswalk more so than they do yield to non-white pedestrians. In particular, the best yield in terms of cushion and allowing the pedestrian to go in the crosswalk is when the pedestrian is a white woman. And the worst is when the pedestrian is a black man. So the issue is, yes, as we train AVs, as we think about all of these things, it should not be that what is the behavior today from humans is simply being transmitted directly, so that if that's the case, then AVs are going to mimic what is happening now. And in the broad context of reducing pedestrian fatalities, we need to focus, and some more research can be done. Is this also because of darkness that it's much more difficult to see a pedestrian during dark conditions. These are the kinds of behavioral things that we need to study before we can say, yes, AVs are going to be the panacea. I do feel AVs in the large scheme of things will improve safety. I'm a little bit more skeptical about the argument that AVs is going to do better for traffic congestion, is going to reduce energy. That I'm much more skeptical about in the large scheme of things, unless there's this paradigm, you were talking about it, where it's more of a regulation of how do we make it more autonomous public transportation systems, not autonomous personal vehicles.
Yeah, Drago?
So I want to share some of the data we have on safety that we collect. I think a lot of us actually are in this domain working on autonomous vehicles because we were inspired by the opportunity of autonomous vehicles to contribute in this space. Just to give you some idea, in about 40,000 people get killed as a result of accidents in the United States every year. This is a statistic from around 22. 2 million get injured. So most of you will know such people, and that's a testament to that, right? And in the world, it's 1 million people, I think, deaths roughly on that order. We, by now, have significant track record delivering rides to people in now 4 main cities, counting Austin. Just to give you an idea, our scale at this time is reasonably sizable. We give over 200,000 paid rides to customers every week. This is over 1 million, well over 1 million miles driven on public roads every week. And we publish safety studies and track record of our driverless service periodically online. And the last installment, actually I presented it 2 weeks ago. And this is at 50 million miles. And we track different types of accidents and how in our estimate, autonomous vehicles, well, increase or decrease the incidence of such accidents compared to humans that drive in the same domain. And some numbers, I remember them because I presented them and I remember numbers. We track and report several classes of incidents. Maybe the most severe is airbag deploying crashes. That one, we've decreased in our study 83% compared to comparable humans in the same case. This is over 60 crashes basically not happened because there is a Waymo. Then crashes where there is an injury, in the estimation, we're over 80% fewer. That's over 150 injuries, right? And then, so like this is the kind of statistics. Separately, we were studied by insurance company. There's Swiss Re. I think they did a couple studies. The last one was late last year. So compared to humans, in their estimates, it's a third party, we are on damage claims, it's 80% better, and on bodily injury claims, about 90. So these are that's what hopefully so far we have demonstrated. There is some statistical evidence is starting to accrue, and and we've dedicated to deploying things in an incremental manner, working with the community. It's not just, of course, dump a whole bunch of hundreds of vehicles all at once, and trying to be thoughtful of making sure that our safety record is strong in the cities that we're confident to deploy. So I think maybe you're pessimistic, at least on the safety side. Actually, I mean, you did confirm it's mostly about the timeline. Maybe a lot of it is there today.
Just to be sure, I was not pessimistic. What I was saying is that safety, I think, will be the clincher to move because of human judgment error. That is the main cause. So what I was trying to say is that caution needs to be exercised in terms of any algorithm that tries to take human behavior and transposes it into a computer-generated AI-type machinery. And this is an example, if you just feed what is happening in the world today into an AI, it's going to yield much more to a white woman and not yield to the black pedestrian. And that's where you have the overrepresentation in terms of fatalities and crashes. So I think caution needs to be exercised. I think the excitement in transportation is, 40,000 deaths each year. It is incredible, and it's humbling to us in the transportation profession. We have done so much over the years, and it's been not just 2022. It's been so sticky, it's unbelievable. Go back to 2000, it's about the same. We have not been able to reduce the number of fatalities on our roadways or the number of crashes. And despite so many things we have tried to do, and it's humbling for us in the transportation profession, and we do see. And that's where I'm not sure if you didn't hear or you misstated. No. I was not pessimistic about safety. I think that's where I feel there can be the most benefits from AVs.
Just maybe
one more response, and then we're going to go to the public.
Just to want to clarify, right? So we're not building a pure human imitator or an imitator of the average human. That's not what we've tried to build. If you also notice, Waymo will drive at the speed limit, whether some people don't like it, but we obey the law. Right? But we also have a study, for example, we published our safety research team. They looked at incidents where Waymo observed them, and people speeding. And in our analysis, if people drove the speed limit in those times, a lot of incidents could have been prevented or mitigated.
So my comments were not intended toward Waymo.
And I'm responding now. My second comment is about humans in general, right?
But I had a quick question for Kristin. Yeah. Kristin, what's been the experience that you all have had after all of these AV-type vehicles have started on our streets?
I guess it depends on who you ask. So for the AV working group, obviously it's mostly public safety. We have police, EMS, and fire representatives, and they all work in the right of way for their various calls. For crews, we had multiple instances where they may run over a fire hose, where they encroached on patient care actually being done. So it came very close, within 15 feet of an ambulance as it was providing care in the street, which is obviously concerning. If a car passes by that close to you when you're in the middle of the road, you're going to be afraid, even if you are a professional. So from the perspective of public safety, first with crews who had way too many cars in a very small area, and now mostly with testing vehicles and Waymo, are that they are overall a safe driver, obviously, but in very specific and unusual instances, things you might not encounter every day, there are still concerns. So for Waymos, they tend to be more opportunistic when they drive. And if there's a soft closure or barrier, like say traffic cones blocking off an area, a human would perceive that and be like, a line of traffic cones, can't drive there. But we've had multiple instances where a Waymo sees it, calculates the distance between the two cones, knows how big it is, and drives through. And that is, it's not great. That's something that should be looked at.
It's learning from human behavior. I mean, that's what humans do.
Well, yes,
right?
but should it? I mean, we've also had a few instances of funeral processions where a Waymo or other AV will see that the light is green and will follow the light instead of somebody who's directing traffic. And so when there are those kinds of things where it's counterintuitive perhaps to programming, those are what we need to find resolutions for, because those can turn into serious safety accidents or concerns, mostly just due to a lack of perhaps perception, maybe it's something else, but trying to also communicate with AV companies on how to resolve these is another issue, because obviously it's a very complex problem, and trying to understand, going through testing, as we discussed earlier, you figure out what the issue is and you test it in a small vehicle and you try to make sure that it's not going to impact other driving behaviors. How long does that take to resolve? And what is the actual resolution process? Because in Texas, we currently do not have any way of regulating or permitting AVs. There's not a driving test for AVs. We don't have a resolution process. So in communicating with AV companies, we hope that some of these more complex issues can be solved, but ultimately trying to close the loop is more difficult.
Well, I think that this could have been turned into a Lex Friedman podcast, like 5 hours. We are in the mood, and these guys are doing great. But we're gonna give an opportunity to our Sissy, do you want to take it? Our audience to ask questions.
Yes, we have time for a few questions. If you could line up at the microphone, just here in the center, and then we'll go back to our panelists quickly for closing thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you for this excellent conversation of infrastructure, technology, and humans. So it really brings me to ask about AI in general, not just AVs. And if you look at having cities free of congestion and yet providing mobility, I think the regular travel of most people is predictable every day. We know where you want to go every day, in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. And so where do you see AI as really helping us to use this predictability in terms of scheduling vehicles and reducing congestion on roads, and ensuring that the backseat driving of humans can actually enable older people like me to experiment with Waymo?
Kristin, go ahead.
Well, I mean, in terms of just AI, obviously the city of Austin is a partner for innovation. The first Waymo, well, the first Google car actually drove in the Miller, sorry. Don't spell it that way.
Our first driverless ride ever was in Dallas. Yes. Yeah, I think.
But one of them was here in Miller in 2015. And so it's not as though we want to oppose technology or even want to say that people shouldn't adopt it. We definitely want to ensure that people have travel choice, really. Like the choice to choose the travel mode that fits their budget, that fits their style, and that gets them where they need to go. And if that is a Waymo or another AV, then that is great. We encourage anybody who has any concerns to call 311 and let us know, so that way we can try and resolve what's going on with an AV company. But personally, if AI is something that's a passing interest, you learn more about it. Generative AI is way more popular now, and so I think gets a lot of media attention. And robo-taxis are an industry that everybody thinks sounds cool, and due to the prevalence of, say, Tesla and their cyber cabs and things, people get interested in something that's very shiny. But it is true that AVs can be very safe. A lot of statistics are published. We wish that there was more data sharing going on, so that way we can just get more information on how to improve what they already know. They have so many sensors on a car. If they're able to let us know where they detect any problems in our infrastructure, that'd be great to know. But anyway, that's more of a general. We like AI, we like AVs, but we recognize that there's still more to do.
Maybe one answer to the question about congestion specifically. There has been research, I think Berkeley and MIT, they studied models where if you have a lot of AVs in the environment.
What schools are you talking about?
That's the ones I read those papers from long ago. They were a few years old. They show that if you control all the AVs to modulate traffic, and there's enough of them, you can actually make it more efficient. That said, the humans need to be in on the game. You don't necessarily want to do this without proper outreach. And of course, there need to be enough AVs. But at least there's research showing that if you have enough of them and you control them, you can impact traffic patterns.
I would just add to that. I think the place where I see AI, and in the context of transportation, AVs help the most is, Kristin was also referring to this, the first mile, the last mile, and integration with public transportation. Having AIs with us owning it is going to create more travel. We have established that, even with partially automated features like lane keeping, automated cruise control, etc. Our estimates indicate that we will travel about 1,500 miles more annually, given that we are traveling about 12,000 miles on average. All of these are averages. You see the increase in the travel. But I think that when AVs and AI can be used for, in the context of transportation, shepherding, if you will, many more individuals toward fewer vehicles, that has to continue.
All right, let's give attention to the public. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for a great panel, some really interesting material. I have a comment and a question. I want to take exception to something that was said, that safety will be the clincher, which surprised me because I know a competitor of Waymo's, I can't think of their name right now, but a competitor of Waymo's that uses camera-based technology instead of LiDAR technology recently failed the Wile E. Coyote test and drove into a picture of a tunnel. And so what I would like to see is regulation that would make technologies like LiDAR that are safer more mandatory or close to mandatory. But I don't see the current government not Austin in particular, but I was thinking more of, I can't think of the name now, but the advisor to the president. There's a problem with regulating this sector that makes me think that cost rather than technology is cost rather than safety is going to be the clincher.
Who do you want to answer this question?
I can respond. I think you bring up a very valid point, and it goes back to what Robin was talking about in her own remarks, where how is this going to unfold? Is it going to be the corporate giants dictating at the end, or is it going to be the public? And I think this is where researchers like us need to be able to stand up and say, at the end of the day, it's quality of life of the public. That is the most important. How can we push back in a society such as ours, which tends much more toward capitalism? So I think these are broader issues, don't have a direct answer to it, but your point is very well taken.
I have a comment as well. So today there was a hearing actually in the Texas Senate that had a hearing regarding a bill regulating autonomous vehicles. The vote is not yet on there, but I'm going to assume it passed. And it would create a board, being the Department of Motor Vehicles, to essentially be able to revoke access or suspend a permit for a commercial robo-taxi service if it is deemed to be, unsafe. If it doesn't provide certain things like a first responder plan, which is how public safety personnel can interact with the vehicle safely. If there is no way of being able to tell if a vehicle is in autonomous mode, they also need to say how to take over a vehicle, because there are times when AVs need to be moved by public safety in order to get them out of the way of an emergency, or if they're stuck and support may be too far away. So some of these are some safeguards that are possible happening within our own state. Federally, I can't comment, but it has been a long time in terms of anything coming down that way. There is a voluntary program that was instituted right before Biden left office, which was called AV STEP, a safety, transparency, and evaluation program that would require more sharing of data, as well as being able to resolve issues like I talked about before, closing the loop on any safety concerns. But that is a voluntary program. So it's possible that there may be some regulation happening in Texas related to autonomous vehicles, depending on, amendments that may get tacked on and it going through the House.
All right, so we have the last two people here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have this question probably for Drago. So I'm from Southeast Asia, and I live in different major cities in Southeast Asia and also in the U.S. And particularly where I'm from, the ride-sharing companies like Uber, a local player like Grab, Gojek, do extremely well in this market. And I'm wondering if not only Waymo, but also just any AV could face any technical challenge or safety issue when interacting in this market, since the traffic is kind of chaotic. This is like not the market for AV at all.
So I was in Vietnam actually over Christmas with my kids, and traffic can be a bit more chaotic, right? That said, in extreme cases, we have also observed chaotic traffic in the States. I used to show this example on Halloween. People just go in the streets and surround you, and you need to do things. So I would say I don't have firsthand experience. I don't see necessarily a reason why a company that tried to do it there would not succeed. Yeah, I think the technology is there where you can build vehicles to deal with such.
Well, there was, Singapore has had large deployment of.
Singapore is a lot more structured, I think. Yeah. It's actually friendly to autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, but I also make this comment. Chaos, as much as it might seem as chaos, is one of the most efficient systems to process vehicles, right? So if you go to Vietnam, and if you had the same kind of structure and system as you had in the United States, people would not have been able to go from point A to point B at all. So chaos has its virtues, and that's where the balance comes between efficiency and safety.
Thank you.
Last question of today.
Hello. I'm optimistic that autonomous vehicles will...
Louder?
Oh.
Louder?
Okay. Hello. I'm optimistic that autonomous vehicles will improve safety, road traffic safety overall, but I'm worried that they introduce concentrated points of failure, specifically regarding cybersecurity risks. I mean, the nightmare scenario for this is something like hackers hold all of Waymo's customers hostage or something like that. Now, I understand. I'm sure you have a cybersecurity division, but
we do.
Yes. Is there any?
And I'm not on it, so I don't know exactly all the details that they do. But you need to take this seriously, not just in the vehicle, but all the way through your whole infrastructure supporting the vehicle.
I certainly agree with Drago on that one. I will say that we have a National Science Foundation grant studying what we call position, navigation, and timing, and the whole issue of spoofing and misinformation provided through the digital web and whatever. If you are interested to know more about that, I would say you should talk with Todd Humphreys. Todd is probably not here, but he's in the aeronautics department. He's leading the effort on behalf of UT Austin on this grant and has done a lot of work in this area.
Okay, thank you all.
Okay, let's give a strong applause to the panel.